Hey guys, Cade Wilcox here, host of the Primitive Podcast. On today's episode, we have Dan Williams, the owner of Williams & Company, a really creative, innovative, great real estate company based out of Lubbock, Texas. I've known Dan a long time, been our go-to realtor. I've always been really impressed, especially with his level of customer service. He's always been a very high volume realtor. And one of the greatest things I've always noticed about him is he's so not salesy. And I've always really admired that about him. He just seeks to be helpful. And so in today's podcast, we're going to talk a lot about leadership, work-life balance, when he thought about starting his own business, just hear a little bit about his story. Hope you enjoy. And I really appreciate you being here. I know you're super busy, so thanks for joining. Excited. I obviously know you really well, but I'm excited for others to get to know you also. So just start by sharing a little bit about your background, where you're from, and just a little bit about your story.
Yeah, so I grew up in small town, much like probably a lot of the people that you talk to here. I grew up in Millshoe, about an hour away from Lubbock. Family was in the retail business.
Okay.
And so we started with office supply store in like 1963. And that branched into some retail clothing, shoes, general store in 96. And I was there through all that and helped with the family business growing up and worked a lot. And then graduated from Millshoe, came up to play a little bit of basketball at LCU with a buddy of mine, and then stuck around, enjoyed it, got a business degree from LCU, and then basically immediately went into real estate. Not quite. I mean, a few months later, got into real estate. Kind of a weird story how that just stumbled over it. I knew nothing about real estate. My parents knew nothing about real estate.
So you had never thought about being in real estate in the past?
No, not at all. Monster.com ad.
Really?
Yeah, dead serious. And it said $50,000 a year salary. And I was like, I didn't know they did salaries in real estate. Well, it turns out they don't. And so interviewed for like 3 interviews at Coldwell Banker, and then ended up saying like, man, I better now than never, and gave it a shot. I knew sales was my thing. Yeah. I knew I always wanted to be in sales. And so got into real estate right after that, and then have now been doing that since 05, 06.
Okay.
So about 15 years.
That's awesome. What sparked your desire for sales? Obviously, it sounds like you grew up in a retail environment, so your parents probably worked nights and weekends and holidays, and so you kind of grew up probably in the back room and then on the showroom floor. So.
Yeah, pretty much. So I grew up at our office supply store, like playing in the back. Every day after school, I would walk from school to the office supply. And then I started helping like with deliveries. That's when you delivered paper to people.
Okay. Wow.
And we did, sold a jillion typewriters and that kind of stuff back then.
Wow.
And then, and then that just kind of morphed in the retail business as we grew in 96, we kind of realized like, man, office supply, like these places like Office Max were, and Walmart got into office supplies. And so they're selling it for what we're able to buy it for because they're buying in such bigger quantities.
Wow.
So it changed our business pretty dramatically. And we were like, we need to get into something, different. And so we reached out and got a contract with Nike and like Caterpillar boots and a couple of others. It was a long process. And, but anyway, so we had a huge building on Main Street in Millshoe, divided that up. And had 2 businesses there, office supply and that the clothing and shoe store. And I started helping a lot with that. So I would help from market, go do shopping. I mean, I started when I was 12 or so.
Wow. That's super cool.
Yeah,
all kinds of skills you probably learned doing that.
Yeah.
So this is interesting. So you probably have a unique perspective on how you brought up Walmart. You probably have a unique perspective on kind of how like Amazon, Walmart, and now Target. I mean, all of them are online now, but particularly Amazon. So do you vividly remember when y'all's kind of small town, locally owned kind of retail store was dramatically impacted by the Amazons of the world?
Oh yeah, big time. I mean, it was just and it started happening and it started going quick. And
is it just as literally as simple as people buy the same products, but now they're buying them literally online versus in person? I mean, is it that simple?
Yeah, and it was, it's cheaper because they're buying lots of it.
Yeah.
And, what's hard for me and what I still like about Lubbock is, we're very supportive of the local businesses. But it's really hard for me to see people go buy online or go do that. I know it's convenient, but the person that has a great shop on 50th Street and gives back to his local community and hires those people and pays taxes here and does all that stuff, those are the people that you have to support. And you understood that in Milshoe. It was different. And, we were behind 5 years on everything.
Right.
So it took longer to hit there. And so you could see what's happening in other markets and kind of
try to adjust
a little bit. So we did, eventually we had to move from Main Street, your old main streets where everybody shopped, like Bell's was across the street from us. We moved from there. We got a grant with the city that we applied for and moved out onto the highway where, we'd get more traffic that came by.
Yeah.
So it kind of changed the dynamics. It was tough to
none of these
watch.
questions have anything to do with what I told you about, but now I'm stuck on it. So I'm just going to keep asking. What do you think? I mean, again, I guess just giving you a unique experience with it, if you're a small shop owner, it doesn't matter what you're selling, but if you're a small shop owner and you're still trying to be viable and competitive given everything you just said about convenience, price, online. I mean we buy almost virtually everything online now, but if you're that small shop owner, how do you think in the 21st century with the way everything has changed that you can still be viable, or can you be viable? How do you carve out for yourself an opportunity being a local retail store of anything, given the nature of the Amazons of the world? How does that work?
I think this goes back to some of the stuff that was on your questions, but I think it goes to some of what you guys talk about in marketing, and that's having a story and something that people attach to, right? Mm-hmm. And that's where one of the best examples, there's a couple of coffee shops in town that I would say they have that story, that background that people attach to and want to support. And then there's the Mountain Hideaways of the world that people love, and they've suffered, dramatically during things like this. But, our business, our family business sold out in 2015, and those people I think have since maybe even closed the store. It's just changed. But I think you've got to have a story that people attach to. And you can't be a commodity, right?
You have to figure out how to differentiate.
Yeah. And that's what I tell our sales agents, at our office is you can't be a key to the door. You got to provide a lot more value than that. If you're a key to the door, there's 1,300 of those in town that can do that service for somebody. So you got to be a lot greater than what that is. And so I think that's where it boils down to, and you got to offer people something that when they come in, it's this experience is off the charts. Yeah. And nobody's ever going to go tell somebody else about their expectations being met. And so you've got to be greater. You've got to exceed their expectations for somebody to go retell that story.
Be compelled enough to be an advocate. No, that's good. That's curious. I always admire people, particularly people who are entrepreneurs. They start these small businesses in retail because, if you don't have a unique story like you're saying, if you don't differentiate in terms of service or whatever it is you're doing, you got a very short shelf life compared to a lot of larger competitors. So, all right, well, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
At what point, or can you remember a point where you knew that you wanted to own your own business and kind of go down this path you are now at Williams & Company? Like, at what point did it become real to you that you kind of wanted to build your own thing?
Yeah, I think I probably always knew that. Because when I, went through college and, growing up working for your own family,
right?
And you got that control of if you see something that needs to be changed, you can change it. And when I was in college and worked at United Supermarkets, I was a day stocker. And which was a great experience. You learn so much about all these systems that you put in place, but then you're seeing efficiencies that you want to put in place. And you're just a a cog in the wheel. I mean, like,
right.
You're not much there. And so I think I always knew that that's what I wanted to do. And that's what's so great about sales is you can kind of control how the outcome of situations, and you can help people so much through a sales role job. So, and then when I was at Coldwell Banker and Westmark, which were great companies, it was always, I was like, how can I help? How can I help change the future of this? How can I see, it was always seeing those things. And it's, then you realize like the only way you do that is, you got to take the risk, and your name's going to be on the building. But a lot comes with that, at the same time, a lot comes with that,
right. Lots of responsibility.
Yeah.
Yeah. It sounds like you've worked since you were really young. I mean, again, it's really the benefit of being a part of a family-owned businesses. Your mom and dad were always working, so you were with them, and so you observed them working. You then started working earlier than most. Sounds like you even worked at United, and so it sounds like you've always worked. Now, now that you're approaching the 40-year-old mark, when you look back over the last 20, 30 years of your work, and I know it was different when you were 10 than it is now, but that's not commonplace now. Mm-hmm. Now, and I don't mean to be too, generalist here, but like not a lot of kids work, right? They kind of don't work until they're either in college or out of college, and it's like kind of a shock to the system. When you reflect on even the way that your parents raised you because of being in a retail store, what do you think some of the most, obvious things in hindsight for you that you learned in that experience? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I mean, I think I definitely learned my work ethic from my parents. Mm. Seeing them work 6 days a week was, an easy week, and most of the time it was 7 days. So I learned a ton from them, just how to do that and how to run a business with, with love and care. You love on all those people that walk in the door, no matter what they need. Sometimes you may make money, sometimes you may not make money. So I think that was probably some of the catalyst that helped me get to the point where I am. And, I learned so many business concepts before I ever went into business school. Business school helped clean all of that up, maybe, because we didn't know. My parents didn't have college degrees; they were just hard workers,
right?
And so, I think that's probably the critical thing I learned, and to kind of set a vision. I think so that way everybody that walks through your door knows what your vision is, and everybody that's working there kind of has that same mindset of okay, we're taking care of the customer no matter what that equates to money-wise. Mm-hmm. And so that's really kind of probably helped and led into where I'm at now with Williams.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I would imagine there's so much that you got to see and watch, in very formative years, from, the time you were born to the time you were in high school, where you just got to learn by observing, and it just kind of became ingrained in you. And it's a good reminder for those of us with young kids too, that demonstrating that very early on, even if it doesn't make sense to them, has a huge impact long term. And I look at the success you've had and how effective you are as a leader, and certainly some of that comes from the fact that you got to observe it for so long. So it's really cool. So you started Williams and Company, is it 3 years old now?
Yeah, 3 years.
About 3 years. Okay. So when you think over the last 3 years, what are 2 or 3 things that you've learned in that time? So not before then, but things you literally have learned because 3 years ago you decided to throw up your own shingle, start your own business, start taking on a bunch of risks that, happens when you start your own thing. So what are some things that jump out to you that you've really learned in these last couple of years?
Yeah, really being intentional is probably top. Just being intentional, whether it's intentional in your hiring process, intentional with your customers, intentional with your staff, intentional with the agents that work there. Just really setting expectations right. I think that's been really key for me to learn, and I've learned a lot of that the hard way because I'm a conflict avoider, big time. So I'm like, okay, how can I solve this problem without ever having to talk to somebody? I'll just stay up all night until I get this solved. And so having conversations with people has been, I've learned that a lot of that the hard way. Setting that vision, it has been crucial for me to set the vision for the team, and kind of, keeping that simple of, okay, hey, everybody, all we do is we add value to people's lives through real estate. And so that's every single day, and ingrain into everybody that you may not get paid today, and you may not get paid tomorrow, but always eventually you're going to get taken care of for doing the right thing. And so that's our people are really sold out on that. And and then that goes to the people hiring the right people. I can teach anybody the real estate aspect of things and how to do the contracts, but it's hard to take somebody from being solely focused on in sales. A lot of people are solely focused on getting the sell and making the money, and then so having those conversations in the hiring process of, okay, what's really important to you? Is it the deal? Is it the money? Or is it taking care of those people? And so we've just got a great team of people over there right now that everybody's sold out on that vision.
What have you learned from failure or some of your biggest challenges? Like what's kind of just like slapped you in the face and is kind of forced you to learn from it?
Yeah, I was I can do everything myself kind of guy. And so it took me a long time to realize like the benefit of hiring somebody that can take care of something. I think it's somewhere, you hear the saying or something like, if they can do it 85% as good as you could do it, then you need to be outsourcing that. And so hiring those people in to come in and fill in the gaps has made a big difference for me. And I learned that the hard way. I mean, I've always been, all right, I'm going to do everything. I can do it all myself. Right. I can work more hours than anybody. And that's, that goes back to what my parents did. We always I can outwork anybody.
Right.
If that's that's all it's about, I can outwork them. And so that's, I've learned that the hard way. I mean, it took me a long time to realize like, you need to hire somebody to do this. And they can do it and they're going to end up doing it better than what you can. And that's hard when you're really proud of,
right.
of yourself.
Yeah, for sure. No, I totally get it. That's really good. Who's influenced your personal growth and leadership the most? Like, when you think back over the years, obviously your parents have made a huge impact on you. Yeah. So maybe someone other than your parents, but like, who do you think's influenced you, or maybe it's a book, or if it's a person, or whatever the case may be?
Yeah, I'm a big learner. I'm a big reader, podcasts, all that kind of stuff. I think you can learn so much from these people that have been ahead of you. And so, I mean, I would say I took bits and pieces of how I've done my business from everybody that I've worked with. I mean, there was great people at Coldwell Banker. There was great people at Westmark that kind of like poured into me, and I was really fortunate to have them in those times that kind of taught me, okay, this is how you do this aspect of the business. This is how you do this. And then I've taken bits and pieces of all of that, and that's what I was compiling all these years to start Williams & Company. And so I took a lot from, I mean, it goes back to LCU professors, how they, some of those there loved on me there, that kind of, encouraged me. And then those in the real estate game before. And now, there's there's so much information out there now, from podcasts and books. And so I'm a big reader, and I feel like I've taken so much from that to kind of learn how my leadership style should be, or how I should treat people, and being really intentional about that is good.
Yeah, it's really good. Okay, so these last couple of questions are really, really practical. So feel free to be as practical as you can think. But do you have rather a specific approach to the way that you manage your time? One thing that I understand in a way that you do, just because we've both started small businesses, is that just a lot of things vying for your time, especially when you love your family. You want to spend as much time there. There are other things that you do beyond work, and yet work has all these things that are required of you, especially early on when you're building a team like you mentioned. So are there certain like really practical things that you do that really help you manage your time, or maybe you just always feel like you're drowning?
Yeah, I think for a long time I always felt like I was drowning, until I kind of learned some of those things by having my own office. So I spending time on things today that'll save you time tomorrow.
That's good.
And so that's really that has stuck with me for a really long time. And so that's like creating the system, creating the efficiency. And so it's creating that checklist so that we're not missing things every time, because we're doing transactions over and over. Granted, each one are a little bit different.
Right.
But if I can create, that's why, we've been able to have, the highest per person productivity in the city for our office is by having efficiencies, and each agent can do so much business by just creating some of those efficiencies. And that's probably like the biggest thing, to manage that time so that then you can go home at a certain time. And I had an agent at Coldwell Banker that kind of poured into me, like setting boundaries early up front. Because if you don't do it, granted, there's seasons of life, and I'm a big person that talks on seasons. I think you probably talk on that. We've got a mutual friend that talks on seasons. And so there's going to be seasons that are different than others, and understanding that and talking about that with your spouse and your family, like, hey, we know that this is the summer selling season, and we don't travel a whole lot. Like we travel around that. And so there's certain things that we really focus on there. But, you create efficiencies and systems that you can put into place, and those can really kind of support you at any point in time when you're kind of out of whack. And and having people that are accountable.
Right.
You got to be, my spouse should be the first one to let me know. And
holds you accountable, yeah.
Yeah, and so Lydia's been really good about that, to kind of keep me in tune with those kind of things.
Speaking of your family, how do you balance work and family, especially when you're trying to grow something? Now you're responsible, for your team, for your staff, for your employees. Yeah. And so what's that, like, kind of learning that balance? Because in one sense, when you were an agent by yourself, right, it's just like you were Dan Williams and you were an agent at Westmark, it's just kind of you. But now you're responsible for a whole company, you have multiple employees. What does that look like for you, kind of balancing that responsibility and that sense of responsibility with the rest of your life and young girls and all that stuff?
Yeah, and I think, it goes back to, if it's important to you, you'd be doing it already probably. And Lydia's been really good about keeping me in check on that kind of stuff, and which is really important. She's, we've had a lot of conversations recently about that, of, making sure that these girls know who their dad is. And, if they're not part of your story, they're going to be part of somebody's story. Like they're going to attach to something. And so that's really been important to me, is to be there, to be at their events, and to know. I haven't always been great about that, for sure. Like you go through a season that it's difficult, but that's why hiring the right people that can help support you, and you can work together to get things done. And scheduling it, so being intentional, that goes down to, like, me and Lydia's, like, we calendar lunch once a week now. We have never done that until the past couple years, the past year. Having everything in that calendar to know that, hey, this is where I'm at, and so my assistant's going to know, like, hey, I'm with my wife at this time.
Very proactive, very intentional.
Yeah. And so that's that intentionality that I learned a long time ago, and Lydia taught a lot of that to me. But that's been key in not only business, but in family.
Yeah, that's cool.
So, yeah.
That's really good. I probably take this too far. Lacey gets on to me a lot, but coming into 2020, a couple of months left when 2019, I printed out 12 months of calendar, the actual sheets of paper.
No, I love that.
And I circled every single trip. I planned it all before 2020 even happened. She says that's extremely obsessive, but like you've just been talking about intentionality, something's going to vie for something's going to get your time. Yeah. And so if you don't budget your time, someone else is going to get it. And instead of being, proactive, you're reactive. And so I appreciate when you use words like proactive and intentionality, because it really doesn't matter what you're doing, whether it's your own business or you're a teacher or whatever. If you're not intentional, you're going to be reactive.
Yeah. And I did the same thing with my calendar. Is like, we looked at, okay, here's all of our travel for the year. So let's so if this is a priority, that needs to be there first, and then we can work around that. And that's where, like, most of your clients and a lot of real estate people are like, oh, I can't do that, or I can't do this because I'd miss somebody. I mean, if you tell them out far enough in advance, and you're setting that expectation of, hey, this is my time. And I talk about that with the agents, like, don't say, hey, what works for you?
Right.
Does, Monday, Tuesday, you tell me what works for you? No, send them, hey, I have Tuesday at 3:30 or Wednesday at 4, or give them some options, and they're going to respond most likely with, hey, that one works. And now I'm calendared and it works within everything that I've got going.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, it's super, super helpful. And for those who are listening who maybe aren't as intentional or proactive in that, it really is transformative, and would encourage you to consider what that would even look like in your own life. All right, last question for you. What keeps you inspired? What helps you think about the future? Again, one of the big challenges of really for anyone when you get in the work, right? You're constantly in the work. You're focused on the work. How does Dan Williams kind of rise out of the day-to-day, out of the details, out of the very necessary things that are a part of running a business, and think about the future and stay encouraged and stay inspired as the leader and kind of the pulse maker, if you will, of your company?
I mean, I think that comes from, part of that's family, Lydia, Maddie, and Abby. I think that keeps me inspired to go and do, and they encourage me in that. But being surrounded by great people, you're the sum total of the people that you hang out with the most.
That's so true, isn't it?
You see those people and you connect with those business people. And that's why we do things like, some of these young leadership type events where you're just connected to other people that are encouraging you to be more than what you are. And I think there's that balance though too, where you kind of get too off the rails and you kind of start focusing so much on work or being something. So then you got to sit back and say like, okay, I should have defined success. I was terrible at that at the start. In sales, it's really easy to get out of that. Like you've got to define success for yourself so that kind of, all right, I'm good stopping right here. And I'm good, and I'm going to dig in, and I'm just going to be better within this instead of saying I need more or I need, something else. So kind of like my theme for this year, I stole from it was a little bit of a cheesy book, A Love Letter Life, and it was and he was talking in a relationship mode, but I've kind of used this with my girls. Is this the story you want to tell? And so like kind of asking yourself in everything that you do, that's kind of inspired me a little bit this year. And I was on a trip, and I've got a daughter that's super sweet and super smart and very timid. And she's like, I'd love to go on this big slide, but I'm too scared. I don't want to do it. And I was like, it came and I was like, is that the story you want to tell? And she's like, what do you mean? I was like, well, when we go back to school on Monday, is that the story you want to tell everybody? You want to say like, hey, I went to Cancun and I wouldn't go on this huge slide. That was so awesome. And she's like, no, I'd rather tell them that I went on the slide. And I was like, well, great. Then let's go do the slide. And she did, which was shocking to me. And it's like that statement and kind of thinking that through in everything that you do, like, is that the story you want to tell? That's been changing and inspiring for me this year. Cool. With every decision you make, if you can kind of ask yourself that, and then it goes back to, customer service with the agents in the office. Is that what you want to tell? Is that the story you want them telling other people? And so asking yourself that over and over. So I'm hoping that's a cool theme for really kind of the year.
Yeah, that's super cool. Well, man, thanks for all your time. I've admired you for a long time, even back when the Nashville Swifts were pounding on the mule shoe. Was it Broncos? Mules? Yeah.
I think one of our very first games out of football season was against y'all one year, and I remember. Do you remember Daryl Lewis?
Yeah, he played football at WT,
I think he
right?
just ran over one of y'all's guys, just like knocked him out. It's like we just came out of football, and yeah.
Not that anyone else would care about this, but the first time I remember playing you guys was in that summer league in Dimmitt in their old gym. You remember that? It's in a summer league. That was crazy. Anyway, all of our listeners are now saying, "Okay, time to end this podcast." No one gives two rips.
Nobody cares.
That Mulesview basketball.
Yeah, it's true.
Well, man, thanks for being on. I in the intro that I recorded prior to this about it, I just shared why I admired you, and just, first of all, your effort and how much you put into your work, but then just the way that, you you provide a service. You never come across salesy. You're extremely helpful. And so it's cool to hear, you talk about even how you've tried to establish your company and the way you approach it. And for me, one, as a client of yours, but then, sending other people to do as well, is like actually observing that in practice. So it's cool to hear you talk about it, but then for me to be able to observe it and see it makes it even cooler. So thanks for sharing all that knowledge and for being on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me here. It's been great. It's likewise, we enjoy seeing what you guys are doing over here across the alley from us.
Across the alley.
Yeah.
Thanks, man.
Yep.